Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. It's Ciara, and if you're new here and have not yet done so, please hit that subscribe button. We really appreciate all the support we can get. Now let's get started. Today I just wanted to give a little bit of information about my application process into medical school. I'm officially class of 2024 into medical school. I'm a medical student now, and it still seems just so surreal to be saying this because exactly at this time 1 year ago I wasn't even sure if I was gonna do well on the MCAT or even pass. So I'm gonna share my MCAT score, my GPA, every school I applied to, which schools offered me interviews, and which schools accepted me. I didn't have the best MCAT score, but even without the highest MCAT score, they still take so much more into consideration, such as your extracurriculars and all the other things you have done. So don't just focus on the MCAT score because it's so much more than that. So I received a 506 on the MCAT. I got 124 Chem and Physics, 128 Cars, 126 Bio, and 128 Psych and Soc, which I would say is on the lower side. It is a good score, and it is a score that's high enough to get you into medical school, but when I was doing all my research on how to get into medical school, everyone said aim for about a 510. And even on YouTube, when you look up how I got accepted into med school or how I did well in the MCAT, it seems like everyone scored in the 97th percentile and everyone had a 515 and above. So I believe that you had to have such a very high score in order for you to get accepted. And I didn't see a lot of information about what about the people who got less than a 508. I was nervous about my score because I didn't know 506 was enough. But like I said, there's a lot of other things to take into consideration. It's not just your MCAT score. I had applied right after I finished up my junior year of college. So after 3 years, my cumulative GPA was 3.92. My science GPA was a 3.87 and my non-science GPA was a 4.0. So I was on the higher side for GPA range, but like I said, GPA and MCAT score isn't everything, so just take that into consideration. The school list of schools you're going to apply to is one of the most important things you need to focus on. The biggest tips I have is 1, apply to enough schools. I would say around 20 schools, give or take, is the perfect number of schools to apply to. You also want to apply to schools in a broad range of location. If you're from New York, you don't want to only apply to schools in New York. So you want to make sure you're not only applying to a certain type of school. And you also want to look at the school's demographics. So one of the things I did when I was applying was I looked at the average GPA and MCAT scores for that school and saw that I was, somewhat within that range. And the majority of schools I applied to, I was within their range of MCAT score. But there's no such thing as a safety school when it comes to medical school, but I did throw a couple of schools that I thought would be easier to get into based on the scores they accepted. And then I also threw in schools that were considered rich schools for me. So definitely apply to schools that you might not think you can get into because you never know. But also make sure you're not only applying to, Ivy League or top 20 schools if you don't have top 20 school in MCAT score. You don't want to, only apply to those schools. Also, I didn't do any research. I had 0 hours of research experience. But I made sure when I was looking for schools, if you find a school that says they're very heavily into research and that's a part of their mission statement and that's a very important part of them, maybe don't apply to that school if you don't have any research experience. I had to take a couple of schools off of my list just because I didn't have enough research experience to get into those schools. Another thing to also keep in mind is a lot of public schools have in-state biases, so they mostly accept residents of that state. So don't apply to all state schools of a state that you're not a resident of because that will lower your chances of getting in. So now on to the list of schools I applied to. I applied to 19 schools and I applied to 13 MD schools and 6 DO schools. I submitted my primary applications on June 15th and it takes about 4 to 6 weeks to get verified. So mine was verified by July 10th. The MD schools I applied to Drexel, Temple, Morehouse, Howard, Eastern Virginia, George Washington, Tulane, Loyola, University of Arizona, Virginia Commonwealth, Emory University, University of Maryland, and University of Connecticut. I applied to 6 DO schools and they were PCOM, NYIT, Rowan, CCOM, Campbell, and Nova. Out of these schools, I received 11 interview invites. 6 MD interview invites, and I received 5 DO interview invites. And these were from George Washington, Eastern Virginia Medical School, Loyola University, Maryland, University of Connecticut, and Morehouse. And for DO schools, I received an interview invite from all of them except one. The only one I didn't receive an interview invite was from Chicago College of Medicine. So I pretty much finished all of my secondaries before August, and I received my first interview invite around the first or second week of August. So it was very early on. And my first interview took place in September, and my last one was in November, but I did continue to receive invites all the way through February. So remember, this is a long process. You just have to be patient throughout the whole thing because the interview process doesn't end until March. So you can continue to receive interviews all throughout the winter. Out of all of the MD interview invites I received, I attended all of them except Loyola University because they had offered me an interview after I had already received an acceptance from a school I would pick over them. And then for DO, I ended up only attending 2 out of the 5 because after I went on my interviews, I realized that I definitely wanted to go MD over DO. So after I received my first MD acceptance, I decided not to attend any of the other DO interviews. I ended up receiving 4 acceptances, 2 MD and 2 DO. Initially from those 7 interviews, I received 3 acceptances, 2 DO and 1 MD. I received acceptances to both of the DO interviews I attended, so both from NYIT and Rowan. And from the 5 MD interviews I had attended, I had received 1 acceptance outright, which was George Washington University, which was actually one of my reach schools, and I think it is, if not the top, one of the top most applied to medical schools in the US. So I was completely shocked to get accepted there, and I was very excited that I received an acceptance from there. And for the 4 other MD schools I interviewed at, I was put on the wait list. So they don't start pulling people off the wait list until after the April 30th deadline when you have to choose your medical school. So after that deadline, I did receive 1 more acceptance from Eastern Virginia Medical School, who had originally put me on the wait list. So altogether from this cycle, I went on 7 interviews and got accepted to 4 out of the 7 interviews. I'm very excited to say that I'm going to be attending George Washington University School of Medicine here in Washington, D.C., and I'm very excited to be going there. I hope this video helped you decide how to make your school list and which schools to apply to, and also just gave you some confidence that even if you aren't too sure about your score, your GPA, still apply. So if I can do it, you can definitely do it too. If anyone is interested in a more specific video, I can tell you exactly what extracurriculars I had on my application, exactly how many hours I had on my application, how many letters of rec I had, all of the specific information. I can even make a video about the interview process and how I conquered that. There's so much information I have, how I studied for the MCAT, and I would love to share any advice or any tips for pre-meds out there. So if anyone is interested in those, I will definitely make more videos about my medical school journey. Good luck on your applications, and I know you all will get accepted as well. Thanks for watching.